Hello everybody, welcome to the Sideline Sedo YouTube channel. I'm Sideline Sedo, or you could just call me Sedo if that's easier. I'm the host here. If you've seen the first two videos, you'll notice that the production value was not quite what it is now. Now I've got a little makeshift studio with a little set, mic, same mic, but got a camera, iPhone camera recording, a little ring light, some LEDs, fancied it up a little. And yeah, if you haven't already, please give the video a like. The support means a lot. The more support I see, the more likely I'm gonna be to want to put out more content. I will still be putting out content regardless, but at this stage, every like, every subscribe, every share, comment, whatever it might be, it really helps. Helps get some visibility, helps also, motivate me to want to do more and put even more effort to the videos. So without further ado, the topic of this video, the moment you've all been waiting for. I tried recording this video about 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, there was a mishap. I recorded it on like a kind of tier list sort of deal. So I was recording basically a tier list of the table, relegation, first place, second place, the whole works. And I spent about an hour and a half just rambling. Not even rambling, I felt like my thoughts were relatively concise. It was going to be like a really way too early kind of predictions. A month away from the start of the season. Now we're a little under 2 weeks away. And quite frankly, I feel like at this point, besides maybe Chelsea going in for Jules Koundé, we still don't know what's up with Ronaldo. There's a few more moves, now that Zinchenko's gone, one would anticipate that City is going to go in for Marco Cucurella. It's really just more or less set in stone at this point. Obviously, there's the propensity and capacity for teams to go out there and still make signings, but we know that especially the higher end managers, they prefer to have everybody in their squad in preseason, really, not even before the first game, before preseason kicks off. That's not to say that transfers don't happen or they can't, especially like going back to Jesus and Zinchenko to Arsenal, their moves that they don't really need too much time to settle. Like they'll need some time to settle within their new squad and their whole, I guess, just the makeup of Arsenal and really what they're going for in their play style. But besides that, they're Premier League proven players. It's not going to take that much time for them to really, settle into the league and find their footing. One would anticipate they're going to hit the ground running because they've been doing bits at City. That's why they went for so much money. But anyways, without further ado, we're going to look at the Premier League table for next season. This is going to be completely right. I know for a fact it will be because, A, I'm a wizard and I have the ability to read minds and, do telekinesis. So this is 100% right for sure. Not really. I'm not that good at predictions. But yes, we're getting into it. Once again, this is just my predictions. I'm really not that guy. Like, I don't think I'm that guy. Maybe I am. Maybe I get all 20 right. But at that point, the CIA might just do some studies on me because that would be quite shocking. People really don't predict these tables all that accurately too much. So, yeah, here we are. Let's just get into it. Enough dilly-dallying. The housekeeping's done. Welcome to the channel. Hit the button. You know the button. Let's get into it. So, at 20th, I'm going to group these three together because they're in the relegation zone. But the teams that I see getting relegated next season are 20th, Bournemouth, 19th, Fulham, and 18th, Southampton. Yes. 2 promoted teams going down, but also Southampton going down. What leads me to this conclusion? Well, let's start with Bournemouth. 20th, rock bottom. I think they're going to have a horrible season. They haven't really signed anybody. They got Ryan Fredericks from West Ham on a free. They haven't improved at all. They're really just hoping that the likes of Dominic Solanke really can come out somehow, kick into second gear and kind of really just develop in the Premier League more so than what we've seen of him in it. As a Liverpool fan, it's kind of crazy to me that we still sold him for so much. But, they haven't really bought anybody. And in this league, you really need to, if you're getting promoted into the Prem, you need to pick it up, man, because quite frankly, this is not good enough for Bournemouth. If I was a fan of Bournemouth, I'd be fuming. Back when Eddie Howe was at Bournemouth, I can't remember the exact prices of the transfers. They weren't necessarily like falling out with money, but they were spending something. Not nothing as it stands. And it's a little too late to be going out and making big money moves. I think what they have is what they got, and quite frankly, what they got is just not good enough. 19th, Fulham. This might be a little harsh on Fulham. They lost Frank Zambo Anguissa to Napoli. They still have Mitrovic, their talisman. They lost Carvalho to, Liverpool for about we kind of fleeced them, let's be honest. He went for like somewhere around 5 to 7 mil and a tribunal to be played between the two clubs down the line. It doesn't bode well for Fulham, I don't think, personally. I think they're going to struggle defensively. I think they're going to struggle in terms of depth. I think Mitrovic will score, but we'll see this season, I think, personally, that Mitrovic he's a decent striker, ultimately. A better striker than what Fulham maybe deserves. But I think the lack of service in that squad is just going to come down to bite him. And I know they signed Joao Palhinha. I referenced that in the last video. But 18 mil, great deal. I think maybe a solid player. We'll see how he translates to the Prem. But I think he's going to be a good addition to the squad. But ultimately, you lose Frank Zambo Anguissa, you bring in Joao Palhinha. It's really a lateral move. There's not much gained, not much lost. 18 for the price of 18 mil in today's transfer market, that's a relatively sound and reasonable price. So they just haven't, once again, not enough business that I've seen that was captivating for me. They've lost some integral components. They lost Neco Williams, who went back to loan to Liverpool and now has been signed to Forest. They haven't made moves. These two newly promoted sides, especially relative to Nottingham Forest, who we'll get to in a moment. But first, Southampton. Yeah, I saw a story today said Southampton wants Liam Delap from Man City for around 16 mil. They've been signing a lot of young talent. If I'm not mistaken, Ko Itakura from Man City also signed for them. I know they have Romeo Lavia. It's also kind of the same squad as last season, but they're without Broya. Broya, I think, is a solid. He scored 6 goals last year. He's an okay player, but for what Southampton was going for, they probably should have tried to keep hold of him and bring in a striker, but shedding him and then maybe bringing in Delap, who I don't even know if he's played a full 90 minutes of a Premier League game. It's a bit of a concern in my eyes. And quite frankly, I think it's under Hasenhüttl, there's been this trend where Southampton progressively each season, they really invest in their youth. the first half of the season's okay, and then they collapse. But I think this season they're just not going to have the quality to really kick on in that first half, and it's going to expose them a bit. And I think it's going to end up getting them relegated, quite frankly. I just don't see the quality being there for them. I don't know. I wish them the best. I like Southampton as a squad. I do think that their time in the Premier League has come, though. This transfer window and just the form at the back half of last season, I think it's a recipe for disaster, quite frankly. I don't see them doing well. Now, out of relegation into 17th place. By the way, I have a book here that I'm looking down at, and it has the whole table listed here for me. So I've written it down. I've taken the luxury to write it down, I guess, just to keep myself on track and to kind of keep it a little organized. I have some thoughts here, too, for each team. 17th, though, Nottingham Forest. Newly promoted under Steve Cooper. They just signed Jesse Lingard to a staggering £200,000 a week contract. That'll last a season, if I'm not mistaken. I've seen a lot of talk about this transfer, like, oh my God, they're going to bankrupt themselves. Oh my God, he doesn't deserve that much. Yes, he doesn't deserve that much. But no, I don't think they bankrupt themselves because, hey, they're ultimately going to be paying him around £10 million when it's all said and done, maybe a little more. If he had a contract at Man United that lasted until the end of this upcoming season, and they had to go out and pay for Jesse Lingard, whatever wages they paid him, which probably we could guess maybe around 100K at that point, just because they're like, a struggling team, and he could realistically go to a West Ham or somebody else. That's ultimately like right around there. Pay $10 million for him in terms of transfer wages, and then pay basically 100K a week. That's an extra 5.2 mil. That's around 15.2, maybe 15 to 20 mil. That's not very far off, and especially if you get to stay up in the Premier League, or hey, I said you're in 17th. If you do even better, you'll get even more money, or perform in the cups, or so on and so forth. This is about the Prem, so let's not get off track. I don't think Jesse Lingard is a bad signing. I think he's a bit of an overpriced signing, but I do think he will add a bit more going forward for them. They have some promising forwards at Nottingham Forest and the likes of Brendan Johnson. You have Alex Mighton, some other guys who I think could really help Nottingham Forest going forward. Obviously, they got Neco Williams in at right back from Liverpool. He did bits in the Championship last year. I've seen him play quite a bit as a rotational player for Liverpool, and I think he could do good for a team that's newly promoted. So ultimately, I think they're doing good business, and I think Steve Cooper is a pragmatic enough coach to take them, and I think 17th is where they'll finish. But ultimately, I do think that there is maybe a bit of a chance for them to do even better than this, but I don't think they're going to get relegated ultimately. That's, I think, what's at the heart of this prediction. I don't think they'll get relegated, but I do think that they'll maybe struggle to get on, so to speak. Like, they won't do much more than not get relegated. 16th, Brentford. Well, I'm sorry, Thomas Frank, but I think this is a bit of a year of exposure for him. Second season syndrome. I think it'll kick on a bit. They have Ivan Toney still, who I think if he stays, they're up. It's not as easy as that always. He could get injured. There's a lot of things there. They don't have the depth to really do much if they suffer one or two major injuries. But, they are a team that isn't in any other competition, can really just focus on the Prem, and will be playing maybe 1-2 games a week tops Well, actually, I don't know. With the schedule now, the World Cup, it's going to be hectic for everybody. So either way, they're going to need the depth. I don't think they have the depth to be successful this year. I think some of the top six have really strengthened. I think some of the mid-tables gotten a bit more competitive. But yeah, I don't particularly see Brentford doing too well. They do have, obviously a lot of younger guys and a lot of cheaper, more, I guess, out of left field players. They go out and sign these guys who fit the bill for what they're going for. Cheap, undervalued in the market, who can overperform in the league. And quite frankly, while I do see a lot of potential at Brentford, I think they might have to take a step back before they can take a step forward. So that's why I think I have them at 16th, quite frankly. I just haven't seen them make a lot of moves. That team's all right, but it's just all right at best to me. I think with the players that he has, Frank is getting the most out of them. But ultimately, I think Thomas Frank and Brentford's downfall will come in the form of the fact that they're losing such a creative force like Christian Eriksen for effectively nothing. And yeah, I mean, they're not going to replace him. They just won't. They can't. There's not really a player out there who fits that Eriksen bill that would join Brentford, who I think at this moment would revitalize them and change them going forward. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. But for now, Brentford, 16th. 15th. I have Everton. And maybe this is me being a, kind of blindly loyal Liverpool supporter. But they had a horrible season last year, nearly get relegated. Credit to them and the team for staying up, and Frank, Lampard, whatever. But I look at this squad. Sure, they got Tarkowski. Is Tarkowski a hell of a lot better than Michael Keane? I'd say he's better than him, but only marginally. These are both effectively lower mid-table to relegation level center backs in my eyes. I don't think that Tarkowski, moves the needle in the slightest in terms of their defensive aptitude. They still have Pickford in goal, who has, we all know about his countless endeavors and terrible shot stopping with his T-Rex arms. He's not quite the goalie he used to be maybe 2 seasons ago. I think a lot of that has to do with confidence, but at the same time, I don't think he's going to find that confidence with Tarkowski and Mason Holgate or, Michael Keane in front of him. I think it's only going to add to the stress of being Everton's number one, especially with the fact that now Nick Pope is at Newcastle, who's, now funded by the Saudis and are effectively the richest team in the league, in the world, actually, might I add. So I guess for the England number one, it's a little tough, for Pickford. He's really going to have to fight to get his spot for the World Cup, but he's going to be fighting fire with fire. Let's put it honest. Put it honestly, my bad. But yeah, Everton, they lost Richarlison. They haven't signed anybody who I think is going to become their new talisman. There's some all right young guys there, the likes of Anthony Gordon. I saw this one kid, I forget his name, but he looked interesting in preseason for them. They have a lot of young talent. It seems like Frank is trying to, go with the youth revolution a bit there too, but I just don't see them really improving much this season, especially with the loss of Richarlison and the, I guess, fact that there's not been a real true replacement for him. It kind of, if I was an Everton fan personally, I'd be a little concerned. But I think they will have like a similar season last year. I think there will be a bit more positives to take out of it, even though it is a 15th place finish. I think Everton will be a little more stable throughout the whole season, and will only really, I think, towards the second half of the season, maybe start to pick up some injuries, some knocks, and I think a lot of younger guys are going to get phased into the squad, and they'll have some growing pains. But I think by the end of the season, we'll talk about Everton in a slightly better light, hopefully for them, but I don't see them really improving. 14th, we have Brighton and Hove Albion. Yes, well, Brighton, another one of the, football hipster teams, so to speak. They're very shrewd with their transfers. Basuma's left them for 25 mil. That's going to be a really tough hole to fill in that squad. Trust me. I think that's one of the hardest areas of replacement in the whole league this year, for Brighton to go and find somebody who's good enough to fill in the shoes of and the void that Basuma left. But ultimately, in my first predictions, I had them a little higher because I thought they would reinvest that money all right and whatever. But I mean, Mark Cucurella, heavily linked to Man City. I could totally see that move happening. He's Spanish too. If I'm not mistaken, he's from La Masia. Pep probably is salivating over Cucurella. He has now gotten rid of Zinchenko, which ultimately frees up the spot for somebody like Cucurella to come in. And hey, I mean, he might even start, most games, because then you could have Cucurella on the left, Cancelo on the right. That's very scary. But ultimately, not only is Mark Cucurella leaving, I saw that I believe the team is, I don't know if they're in Serie B or Serie A, but Salernitana, my apologies if I butchered it. I don't have the name in front of me and I'm doing it off the top of my head. But they're in for Neil Maupay. And while Neil Maupay is about as effective as a bag of potatoes across the course of the whole season, he scored against Liverpool a few times. I know but even though Neil Maupay is not great, he's gonna be missed, I think, at Brighton. I think that they're gonna kind of shift back a little too. I haven't seen too many great transfers either for them, so I think the losses of Bissouma, Cucurella, and potentially Maupay, I think that could really sting them this season, but we'll see. 13th, Leeds. Got Leeds United under Jesse Marsch. They're another team who, similar to Brighton, I think it's interesting having them next to each other because I think they've gone through similar windows. Brighton's lost Bissouma, now potentially Cucurella and Maupay, whereas you have a team like Leeds who's, they've lost Calvin Phillips, effectively their captain. They've lost Rafinha to Barcelona, basically their star attacker, and now they've gone and invested that money in the likes of Tyler Adams, Brendan Aronson, Luis Sinisterra, and a few other guys, if I'm not mistaken. But those were the three big signings. And I look at both of these clubs, and in Leeds, I see a team that said, all right, we're going to lose these guys anyway. It's time for our manager to take hold and kind of morph the squad in his image. And he brings in a bunch of young, promising talent. Mark Roca, that's another signing for Leeds. Came from Bayern. Will he be good? I don't know. Ultimately, I think Leeds has just invested their money a bit better. I still think the quality overall is lacking, maybe in that back line and just overall in depth for Leeds. A lot of the bottom half teams, they really just lack that second unit to come in and change the game. And now that 5 subs are coming, maybe some younger guys get some breakthroughs in a lot of these squads. Who knows? But I do think that a lot of the teams that are in my bottom half, at least, if you look at their squads on paper, they're just really lacking in terms of depth. So yeah, I have Leeds at 13th and on to 12th. In 12th, we have Leicester City. Well, I don't hate Brendan Rodgers. I don't love him either. He had a very tumultuous reign. I mean, ultimately, I'd say he was successful as Liverpool coach. I think he was a good transitionary manager, and once Klopp came in, I mean, that's a whole different conversation. But what he's been doing at Leicester has been, I think it's been nothing short of incredible, quite frankly. I mean, he's gotten them into the Champions League. He's gotten them into, European Cups, constantly competing and trying to really mark themselves as a top 8, top 6 team. And with the youth academies that they're developing, and they look absolutely beautiful, state of the art, really. I do think that ultimately Brendan Rodgers has had a good reign at Leicester. But I do feel that Leicester and Brendan Rodgers as a whole have kind of been maybe over-reliant on Jamie Vardy. He's a quality player, and I still think he has maybe a season or two left in him, but I think we saw last year with some of the injuries he picked up, when Vardy's out of that team, they're completely different. And quite frankly, I just feel like they're going to take some steps back this year. I think that Leicester as a squad, they might lose Yuri Tielemans, which would hurt them tremendously, I would imagine. If he doesn't extend this summer, he's probably going to go out on a free next year. So they're really at this precipice where they have one of their best midfield talents effectively getting ready to walk through the door. It doesn't matter that Yuri Tielemans has been maybe underperforming in terms of, the quality and expectation you would expect from somebody like him. But I just, I look at Leicester. Kaglar Soyuncu had a meh season. Kasper Schmeichel's getting older a little bit. Vardy, the biggest problem is aging. And then beyond that, I mean, you have James Maddison, you have Ndidi, and you have Pereira, quality players. I know that some of them suffered some injuries, but I just have a feeling that this season isn't going to be it for Leicester. The second half of last year, I wasn't too impressed by them. I think that they're a squad that has quality, but I feel like they're going to encounter some roadblocks, whether that's continued aging from Jamie Vardy, whether that's maybe a lack of stability, maybe it's an injury crisis, whatever it is. I feel like Leicester's just not going to have a good year. I can feel it in my bones. And I had them way higher. I had them almost 8th a few weeks ago. And I think it's just kind of been a meditation on Brendan Rodgers' philosophy for me. In terms of do I think that he's going to get this, for the most part, same squad and get them to go again without really getting a big catalyst and really upgrading their squad? I don't think so. And with the imminent, I would say, departure of Yuri Tielemans going to come either this window or in January, I just feel like they're going to regress. I could see Brendan getting the sack by the end of the season. Maybe right before or after the World Cup. I'm going to say before. I think they're going to hit some bad form at the first half of the season. Right before the World Cup, I could see Brendan getting the sack. Sorry, Rodgers. 11th place, Crystal Palace. Yes, Crystal Palace. They are in 11th for me. Patrick Vieira is one of my favorite managers in the league outside of Jurgen Klopp, obviously, since he's number one. But I do think that last season, Crystal Palace was for me personally, one of the most exciting young teams to watch. I mean, Michael Elise, Eberechi Eze. I know Wilfred Zaha's 30, but the fact that they still have a player as good as Zaha in that squad, and then, the likes of Hudson Edouard and, a few other guys coming in, I think that Crystal Palace will continue to grow this year. But I do think that they're going to put a lot of responsibility on the likes of Elise and Eze to really thrive. And they might even be trying to break into their respective national teams. So, I mean, everybody is. But with them being that they're, I guess, the main men there at Selhurst Park, I could see them having really good seasons. But I still feel that back line of theirs isn't that great. I know they lost Conor Gallagher in midfield, and they brought in Czech Doucouré, who, surprisingly, I was stunned to find this out, is embroiled in a blackmail scandal like weeks after signing for Crystal Palace, which is just nutty. But yeah, I feel like ultimately there is a lot of good areas of improvement for Crystal Palace. I think there's a lot of potential in their squad to grow. But I feel like they're just going to be a little middling still until they get a true quality goalie or center half or both. They're not going to be more than a mid-table team for me. So, sorry, Patrick, but I think you're doing good work. I think they'll continue to grow, Crystal Palace. And ultimately, I think eventually in a couple years' time, we could see them really, I genuinely think they could be competing for a Europa League spot. And if they could do that, wow, that would be incredible. Anyways, 10th place. In 10th, this might be a little controversial, but I have Wolverhampton Wanderers. Yes, Wolves are an interesting act. Under Espirito Santos, they felt very, how do I say it? They felt like they were playing with purpose. Obviously he was bringing in a lot of Portuguese talent, and we still see that as the general composition for the Wolves squad. But year after year, it feels like Wolves sells players. They don't really bring in guys to upgrade. And this year, it's no different. I feel like Wolves is going to have a relatively lateral season. Maybe just a little bit better from last year. But with the looming potential of an exit from Ruben Neves, if he were to leave, I could see that squad just falling apart. I'm sorry, but it's true. They have some other young, interesting talent in the likes of, Pedro Neto and Morgan Gibbs-White, who was linked to Everton, surprisingly, which if they go for him, I don't know what is good with them. But, it's just not, I don't know. Once again, with these guys, it's tough to say whether a younger guy at any team is going to have that it factor. You could look at somebody like Jordan Ibe, for example. Years ago, he came into Liverpool after Sterling left for City, and we're like, well, Ibe's gonna tear it up. And he played okay, but he was clearly levels below the rest of our squad. And I mean, when it was all said and done, we sold him to Bournemouth for a lot more than we should have, and he just hasn't been that guy for Bournemouth. So that it is a fear for a lot of young guys in the Premier League. Can you contribute to a level where it's, where you're going to be productive for us? Not can you, obviously teams have very specific needs. So a team like Fulham or Bournemouth needs somebody just to keep them in at very least, right? That's your minimum goal. And for Everton to go in for somebody like Morgan Gibbs-White is just weird to me, because I look at this Wolves squad, and they have Raul Jimenez, who unfortunately had that whole head injury, and that's kind of I'm rooting for him. I really am. I thought Jimenez was one of the most entertaining strikers to watch before the injury. Since, I think he's been a bit more cautious, just like anybody would, I would imagine. But I do feel like ultimately with some of the components of the squad, getting sold like Jota, the loss of gosh, that's dramatic, makes it sound like he died. That was the wrong use of the word. But I guess regression of João Moutinho, I think that's going to play a part. They don't really have a ultimately super creative guy that I look at. I'm like, wow, this guy's going to be a linchpin. I think Neto can create a lot from the wings, but centrally speaking, you do have Neves. But if Neves leaves, I don't really know. They might not even be in the top half if Neves leaves. But with Neves staying, I think that they'll be okay. I think they'll have some games where they perform really good defensively and just like grind out a 1-0 or 2-1 result. And I think there's going to be games where they get absolutely battered because they're just not going to have the quality to keep up. Ninth place, I have Aston Villa. Aston Villa, I'd say, is one of the best performers in this transfer window. I mean, the likes of Diego Carlos and Boubacar Kamara, the permanent signing of Philippe Coutinho. I think those players all add a lot for them. I know Coutinho performed well last season, I think, the second half of last season, but I do think that he's not quite at the level that he's going to finish at for Villa. I think he's going to continue to rehabilitate his image there. And I think he's going to have a cracking season, especially after, a full preseason and training under Stevie for this whole squad. I think can really help them buy into his principles and develop some of the younger talent, but also kind of enhance the chemistry of the squad. Diego Carlos and Boubacar Kamara are two of the most out of left field but impressive signings of the window for me personally. Kamara, I thought, was done and dusted, going to go to Man United. And Diego Carlos, honestly, I felt like there were so many teams in for him, from Newcastle to maybe Man United to a Chelsea. Like, he could have ended up anywhere, but for him to be at Villa, I know he's 29, but ultimately, I do think that Diego Carlos totally becomes their first choice center half. Is better than not Gibbs. He's better than Mings. He's better than he's definitely better than Courtney House. And probably, yes, also better than Ezri Konsa. But who his partner is, I think, might change throughout the season. I do think Mings will start the year, but I could totally see House or Konsa just becoming a better partner alongside Diego Carlos. I think that Boubacar Kamara offers them a lot in midfield for what they were missing. I mean, having a midfield three of Kamara, John McGinn, Philippe Coutinho with Leon Bailey, Ali Watkins, and Buendia as your front three, that could be pretty nice. So that's why I have him ninth. Eighth, Newcastle United. Yes, Newcastle, baby. I think Newcastle is about to have an absolute ripping season. They signed Sven Botman, who's easily their best best center back. It's been a long video. Sorry. They signed Nick Pope, who I think is one of the best, most underrated goalies in the league. He's one of the best shot-stopping goalies in the league from last season, and I think he's going to do absolute bits in a Newcastle jersey. St. Maximin stays, which I think is huge. Yes, they still have Chris Wood. But I look at Newcastle, and I just feel like they might not be done this window. They're a team that I I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to get maybe a deadline day signing or two, or a signing right before deadline day, and to really reinforce the squad going into next season. But on top of that, I wouldn't count them out to splash some money in January also, because after the World Cup, I could see a lot of teams going in for players, but that were maybe like kind of breakout performers at the World Cup. But I feel like out of every team, maybe in the world, who's going to have not only the ability but the desire to upgrade, I think Newcastle is going to be in a perfect position to snap up some World Cup stars to kind of reinforce their squad in the second half of the season. What makes me think this? Nothing other than the fact that they're funded by the Saudis, so they have a lot of money, and the fact that while they do have Callum Wilson, while they do have Chris Wood, they might want 1 to 2 other pieces either going forward or defensively to really bolster themselves. I think those will come either by the end of this window or the end of January in the winter window, because I look at Newcastle, I think it's a good squad that can be really competitive, especially with how they were playing last year. They really were, I think, they were playing, that the fact that they became the richest club in the world, I think added a ton of motivation to a lot of those guys to want to earn their spot, because they know that this revolution is going to take a few transfer windows. It's not just going to be, Sven Botman coming in is a class signing, but he's not the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle. He's almost like really the first true signing that they're making of their era, because last season or in last January when they were hitting the windows, they got Chris Wood and they got Matt Target, and it's like these guys are decent, but they're not world beaters. And Sven Botman's one of those guys who can become a world beater at Newcastle. So ultimately, I think with all the young quality that they have and just the financial prowess that they're going to be able to flex, I feel like they're going to have a really good season. So Newcastle in 8th. 7th place. Yes, the last spot before the European spots. This was tough for me because of a few reasons that I'll get into later in the video. But I think West Ham will be 7th. Yeah, I had West Ham, I had them 8th or 7th last time around in my predictions. I am still confident that they're going to have a great season and that they're going to perform well. I think Moyes is doing really well for them. I mean, they signed Scamacca, Aguard, Declan Rice is looking like he's going to stay there this season. Fortunately, Naif Aguard has gone down with an injury. I think it was 3 months they're predicting for him to be out for. That's rough because he was really seen as like their big center back signing to bring in. And I mean, you probably, partner him with somebody like Kurt Zuma, and he's, Aguard's pretty tall, and so is Scamacca. So that squad was really going to be huge going forward and defensively. But with Aguard going out for 3 months, this prediction might be a little ambitious. But ultimately, I think once their squad is there, I think West Ham will prove their quality. I think Moyes is season on season proving that he should have. Man United never should have sacked Moyes, because from the moment that Fergie left, Man United became basically a toxic wormhole of a club. And ultimately, I think that an issue with a lot of the Man United managers was the fact that, quite frankly, nobody was given a chance. Mourinho won the Europa League and still wasn't given a chance. It's like, it's tough, Did Mourinho win the Europa League? Oh my God. I've been recording this for probably 40 minutes or an hour now. So if I'm getting some of the facts mixed up, sorry. I also go off tangent a lot. So this video in particular will be extremely long. But either way, Van Gaal, Mourinho, they were both, I think, quality managers who came into United a little too little, a little too late. But Moyes, I think, is proving now that he was a decent manager. It just was a matter of financial backing and also taking time to really craft the club in his name. I mean, you look at West Ham, and if you had Man United currently managed under Moyes, given the financial abilities of Ten Hag and maybe Solskjaer and those kind of budgets, who knows? I think that maybe he could have been, they'd maybe be in the Champions League now for all we know, just because I feel like Moyes was onto something there, but it was never going to work for anybody post-Ferguson. The first manager after Ferguson was set up for failure. It's similar to whoever replaces Klopp and Pep is probably going to be in a very tough spot, because if you're not absolutely thriving and overperforming and winning every game, you're going to be seen as a failure. So I do appreciate the fact that David Moyes has a club in the Premier League where he can really reinvent them in his image. I know he's a bit of a goofball, and I don't think he's the most tactically adept person, but I do think he understands that there's some teams that at West Ham, he's building this squad that's just absolutely ginormous. They're huge. They're going to be a full-on threat every set piece. And I think that honestly brings a different complexity to the game, because especially in the Prem, obviously it's a physical league, but with most teams at the highest level, you expect them to completely tear you down by, passing through your team and having pacey players to cut through the lines and score goals. At West Ham, it seems like they're just trying to outmuscle everybody, which, I mean, if you look at the West Ham-Liverpool game earlier this season, I still have PTSD flashbacks from it, because quite frankly, that's what they did to us on the corners. They just absolutely manhandled us. And I think that, you're getting Scamacca, who's 6'5". Like, think about that. You're adding him to the front. And, Aguard, I think, is like 6'3", 6'4", maybe. He is injured, but either way, I think it's really exciting for West Ham. The likes of Jared Bowen and Benrahma. I think Lanzini's still there, maybe. I don't think he's left. I think them plus Scamacca, plus obviously Mikel Antonio, I think they're going to be really dynamic, but also a very physically imposing squad. So West Ham 7th. Now on to the European spots. Yes. This top 6 could blow some heads. So if you're upset with these, if you don't agree with me, feel free to take it out on me in the comments. And no offense to any teams here, but I have been racking my head on it. Specifically, these upcoming 2 spots have been really tough for me to pin down as to who I think is gonna, so to speak, edge out the competition. But in 6th place, I have Manchester United. Yes, get your pitchforks out. If it wasn't obvious, my bias is there. I'm trying to be as down the middle and unbiased here, but obviously, we're all fans of a sport. And if you support a club, it's going to be hard not to be biased for them. Like, let's be honest. But I am gonna say a few things about Man United and Erik ten Hag that I genuinely believe. I think Erik ten Hag is the right man for the job, for what United really wants to do. They want to obviously get back challenging for the Premier League, Champions League, and all the cups, trophies that they can compete for. Obviously. They want to have what, for me, it feels like they want to have a bit of a youth revolution. So they brought in Ten Hag, who's obviously done bits at Ajax. And so they're entrusting him with kind of crafting the club's image going forward. Will he struggle, Erik Ten Hag, this season in terms of adjusting to the Premier League? Potentially. I mean, it is a new league after all. He's not going to be facing Dutch competition every week. And I guess the last part, this, I touched on it earlier with the whole, anyone who succeeded Sir Alex Ferguson was set up for failure because the heights were just so high. And I think that is very true. If you look at United's whole, I guess, kind of run up since then, right? The managers that they've had. And I feel like under Ole Solskjaer, that is, he was given the time and the money and everything, but he just wasn't that guy. And I feel like United gave him a little bit too much time. He didn't get sacked immediately after the 5-0. But I feel like there's just, it's going to be tough. I look at Man United, and while they've had some decent signings for sure. I mean, I think Malacia is a solid signing. I think Lisandro Martinez is a solid signing. Who knows if they get Frankie de Jong? Eriksen is a decent signing. I still feel like United has this bit of this air of they want to compete next season, like this upcoming season, really bad for the most part, I would say. Obviously, Ronaldo, we don't know if he's going to leave, if he's going to stay. If he stays, their chances of, getting top 5, top 4 heightens dramatically. But I don't think it guarantees it. As much as Man United is in a position to bounce back, to go into the Champions League next season, get top 4 this year, they're at an even bigger chance of failing to do that in my eyes. I think that, Ronaldo's on the last year's contract. He'll play if he stays, but by the time January hits, Ronaldo is going to be looking to sign somewhere on a free for some big money. I mean, he's an older fella. He's already kind of tried to leave United this transfer window. So I think that will maybe have an impact come the second half of the season, especially if they're not performing to his standard. I could see him being like, okay, I'm going to go negotiate, a pre-contract agreement with Juventus or Atletico Madrid or Bayern or whoever. And I could see that kind of biting United and hitting some of the players' morale, so to speak, and kind of, not helping them too much. If he leaves this season, I don't know. I really do think a lot of their success is predicated on Ronaldo, though, because if he leaves late in the window, they're not really going to be able to replace him immediately. They might, because they are Man United. They're so loaded, they might just be able to sign up somebody immediately, but will that guy replace Ronaldo's goals? I don't know. I know they've been impressive in preseason. I know. They beat us. Awesome. They won a cup in Thailand. Great. I still feel like there's a bit more waiting for United before they're back in that Champions League mix. I think a lot of fans feel like United can just bounce back, but while I do like some of their signings, I still feel like overall as a club, there is just certain areas of that pitch that I don't know how it's going to fare. I know Martinez can play defensive mid and center back, but you still have the likes of Harry Maguire there, Luke Shaw, Dalot, who's I think decent, but if he's not playing, you got Wan-Bissaka. These are still very much the same players that are on their Ollie. And while I know it's a confidence thing, and I know that a new manager can maybe breathe some new life into a squad, it doesn't. There's a lot that has to go right for Man United to to get top 4. And I just don't see it. I don't see him getting top 5. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth, because I think that with a young squad, patience is a virtue. And Ten Hag is in many ways getting ready to develop a young squad in his image. So ultimately, I think that there's going to be some growing pains at United this season. I think their midfield and back line is going to be a little shakier than most people anticipate. I feel like scoring goals will, if Ronaldo stays, it won't be a problem. If he's gone, it could be a problem. But at the same time, if Ronaldo leaves, I expect Man United to go out and either fully commit to the Frankie de Jong signing or be like, okay, we're not going to sign Frankie de Jong. Let's try to go and sign somebody like Lautaro Martinez or X, Y, or Z who could replace Ronaldo at the club. But fifth place, I have Arsenal. Yes, the Gunners, Europa League. 5th is the new 4th, am I right? I think Arsenal has had one of the best windows of the season. Gabi Jesus, I think, is going to ball out there. Zinchenko, quality signing. Could play a left back, could play at center mid. He could offer them a lot. For them, it's great news that, as of right now, it seems that the whole Thomas Partey situation is under control and that he will play this upcoming season. So that's another added plus for Arsenal as a squad. And, Saliba, he's, 21 now. He's been on loan for a few seasons. I forget where exactly, but I think it was in the French league somewhere. And you kind of look at Arsenal and, as a fan, it's kind of hard not to appreciate and applaud what Mikel Arteta has done, because quite frankly, it's nobody else is really doing it to the level he's doing it at. No one's bringing in all these young guys and making a whole squad where it's we're going to have a very young squad and we're going to invest in our youth and we're just going to take these risks and put this squad together that's very competitive, actually. Martinelli, Saka, Emil Smith-Rowe, you have Kieran Tierney still there. You have Tomiyasu, who's been doing incredible for them as a right back and as a center back. The list goes on and on. Ben White, he could stay there for another 5 years and probably not lose too much of his quality. I don't think he's that great of a player, but these types of players who are very, moldable and can be fit and almost crafted into the vision that Arteta has for them. I think that's exactly what Arsenal needs to keep doing. This season, though, I think if Tottenham and Chelsea didn't have even better windows than Arsenal, there could be a conversation here. Do I think that they will get top 4 this season? No. I think that they lack maybe 1 or 2 players that are really, really capable of taking them to that next level. But I do think these are incredible steps in the right direction. Zinchenko and Gabi Jesus is a wonderful double swoop. Literally any team in the league would take those two, in my opinion. City obviously got rid of them, but both of those guys would get tons of game time at Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea, Man United, West Ham, all of them. They'd start for basically all those teams for the most part. Maybe not Zinchenko, but definitely Jesus. Definitely Jesus. But anyways, top four. In 4th, I have Tottenham Hotspur. Hotspur. Tottenham has had a hot spur of a transfer window because God almighty, they just have been signing people left and right. I mean, Langley, they signed Bissouma. They signed, who else they signed? Richarlison. Big signing, I think. Big signing in terms of money. I mean, he might score 10, assist 5. But anyways, that's what he's being brought in to do. Tottenham isn't a squad that invests in depth a lot, but I do think Richarlison adds another layer of complexity for them. I mean, they've been doing well with Kane, Son, and Mora, and Kulishevsky really proved himself last season. Perisic, too. Quality player. Real top professional Perisic. I mean, he's been at Bayern, been at Inter, took Croatia to the World Cup final in 2018. I mean, there's very few people, I think, that would fit a Conte system than Ivan Perisic. I think he's quality for them. And quite frankly, I think that you look at Tottenham, and I mean, they also got Jed Spence, it's a huge signing for them. I mean, they're gonna be a very formidable squad. My gripes with Tottenham, though, I will say, how do I say this? I feel as if while Tottenham is awesome in terms of what they've done this window, I still do think that their second unit is a little murky. They're going to be in the Champions League this year. They're going to be in basically every competition that they can play in. The World Cup's a thing. They're going to be full throttle, trying their hardest to compete. I don't think it's going to translate into a competitive title race, but I do think it'll be a scrappy race for top 4. But I think they'll just narrowly eke out Man United and Arsenal to get that 4th spot. I think there's a lot of quality at Tottenham, but at the same time, I feel like just their second unit is, off the bench, there's definitely going to be some interesting players you can bring in, but I still feel like, going from here, like say you have Kulishevsky, Kane, and Son, that's your starting 3. Richarlison, Mora, and I don't even know Troy Parrott. Who's the other forward? That's a complete drop off. Even just Kane and Son, Richarlison, Mora, a whole different level. And I understand that they're supposed to be backups, but it's going to be a tight year. And I feel like Tottenham is one of those squads where if Son or Kane, God forbid, suffers some sort of bad knock for a couple months, that could really derail their whole efforts. I think they're going to have a bit of a bumpy season. Tottenham fans will hope that Antonio Conte stays past this year. You never know with Conte. Conte is like, how do I describe him? Conte is like Mourinho. If Mourinho was born in Italy and every day woke up and just pounded like 12 espressos. He, not in terms of personality, but in terms of the short fusedness of him, I feel like Conte is the type of guy to halfway through the season, everything be going right, and then him say, listen, like, we're doing good, but we need improvements, yada, yada, our midfield or defensive line, we need somebody, and he's like, hey, let's go for Barella or somebody, or Bastoni, and he won't get them, and they'll be like outside of top 4, and I could see him just kicking up a big fuss over that. Admittedly, he is a very cerebral manager. He's very determined. He's set in his ways. I think he'll be successful. I think he'll stay the whole season. I think that by the end of the year, we'll be looking at Antonio Conte as, I'd say either either 3rd or 4th best manager by no stretch of the imagination. I think it's going to be interesting because I think we're going to get a lot of comparisons to Tuchel and Conte this season, just because both of them are under a bit of a metamorphosis, so to speak. Both clubs, they're both kind of undergoing this evolution in this new phase for themselves. So let me just get into number 3. Number 3 for me is Chelsea. I have Chelsea third because, Koundé is set to come in, allegedly, unless Barca pulls another lever or something, God forbid. But Koundé is set to come in for Chelsea, as well as the fact that they've signed Raheem Sterling. They have Kalidou Koulibaly, who's came in, and ultimately, I feel like I don't know if they're gonna sign Frankie De Jong either. Similar to Man United, I know they've been in for him, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if Chelsea goes out and does more business. But even with some of the signings they've done, I like Rudiger as a center back a lot. I thought Rudiger was one of the most impressive center backs last year in the Premier League. He's going to Real Madrid on a free, obviously, and they've lost Christensen as well, and now even potentially Azpilicueta is going to Barcelona. But quite frankly, if you have your back line of Chelsea, if you're looking at the back line of them, obviously Mendy is in goal, and then Thiago Silva. And last season it was Rudiger and Christensen, but this season it's Koulibaly and Koundé. And I think Koulibaly and Koundé, pound for pound, comparing both of those former Chelsea center backs, are not just like a level removed, maybe 2 levels removed, because Koulibaly to me has been one of the best center backs in the world for a while now. Whenever we face him in the Champions League, he was impressive. And in AFCON, I thought that Koulibaly looked legit too when I saw him play. But especially in the Champions League games, I remember him he was imposing as a center back. He has very few center backs have that capability of when an attacker gets a ball that the attacker almost freezes. Like the center back is in full control, and you could tell watching Koulibaly play that he was in full control sometimes. Like he was a menace. He just wouldn't let you get past. He's absolutely stacked in terms of, his frame. He's very strong, very physical defender, very fast. I don't know how he is in terms of distribution, but regardless, I think he's going to be fine. At Chelsea. Koundé as well. He's a little shorter. Is he 5'11", I think? I forget the exact height for him, but Koundé, I think, will take some time for him to kind of adjust and learn, but I still think he's going to be, Christensen's very average to me. I didn't see what the hype was when he was at Chelsea. I don't know why Barcelona's in for him when, there's other players they could have got instead of Christensen. I just think it's a weird signing for Barca. But ultimately, I think that back line ultimately looks a little more sound to me. Just a little bit more. If Rudiger stayed, oh my God. If they got just Koulibaly or just Koundé and you still had Rudiger, that could be very frightening. But ultimately, I think their biggest steal of the window is signing Sterling. Sterling is, I think, the most underrated and overhated player in the league, maybe in world football. Sterling, I remember watching him debut for Liverpool, and from there on out, he was incredible. Him, with Sterling and Suarez and Sturridge, that was truly special for me as a fan at the time. Obviously, I think our front lines have kind of evolved more, so to speak. I would totally trade the current Liverpool setup for what we had when Sterling was there. But even when Sterling was there, I had a feeling, I feel like everybody knew, this kid's special. He's gonna be big. And then he moves to City and he tears it up. Admittedly, there's a lot of people that are like, well, Sterling, he only scores, tap-ins, and, he's this. He only runs, and he runs weird. He runs with his butt out. He goes down easily. Not a team player. What? Stupid. Sterling is one of the best attackers in the Premier League. He's up there with Son and Kane and Salah. Not quite their level, but he is a very, very versatile and frightening attacker for defenders. You do not want to play against Raheem Sterling. Yeah, at City you could say, well, he didn't perform here or there. I think Sterling was a quality player at City. He was a threat for them whenever I saw him play. I think at Chelsea, him being the number one man is going to be quite wild in that setup, especially. I mean, I don't know the formation that Tuchel is going to go with, but just the idea of Mount, Conte, Havertz, all of them really just, playing off of Sterling, that could be crazy. I think it will be crazy, and I think he's going to get them third. Now 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. First and second. The winner and the first loser. When I did this 2 weeks ago, I sat there for a good minute. I thought about who I wanted to put first and who I wanted to put second. At the time, I put Liverpool in second, and I put City in first. And I guess for me, it was set in the idea of, well, I don't want to get too high up on Liverpool's efforts this upcoming season. It is a bit of a transitional season for us. Mane has left, Nunez is in, Carvalho's in, Elliott's back fully, Harvey Elliott. And, I guess comparing and contrasting the teams over the last 2 weeks has been a little interesting for me. Regardless of the Nunez-Haaland debate, who will score more, who, this, that, ultimately it doesn't matter who's going to score more. City is a squad that develops chances at a alarming rate. Literally very few teams in world football history could perform the way City play. They dominate possession, they generate tons of chances, they play champagne football. End of story, full stop. Liverpool, I think both teams, specifically Liverpool and City, are at a space where when I was making this and I was writing the list, in my head, I was like, well, 1 and 2 is Liverpool or City. It's just, it's going to be them. And if it's not them, I'd say that it's been an absolute colossal failure for whoever fails to get first in that 1-2 spot for either team, ultimately. Like, if City gets third or if Liverpool gets third, it's a failure, full-on failure. They're both expected to go on and win the league, in the sense of that is their expectation. And at the time, I was looking at Haaland. I said, well, Haaland's coming in, and, Haaland, De Bruyne, Foden, Alvarez, that's going to be frightening. And I think it's going to be absolutely scary. And I know they got Grealish as well. I know Grealish is there. I know Phillips is in. Cucurella's potentially coming in. They've shed a lot of dead weight. But ultimately, what I think of more than anything now is just the compositions of the squads. Yes, for 90% of the squads, they're the same. I mean, for Liverpool and City. Both of their squads are, for the most part, identical to what they used to be. I mean, Ederson's still in goal for City. Still got Diaz, Laporte at center back. Yes, Cucurella might come in as left back. Yes, Calvin Phillips might play in midfield sometimes. But they still have Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, potentially Bernardo Silva. He might go to Barca, but who knows? If he goes, that's that really muddies a lot of stuff up for them, in my eyes at least. Yeah, you know, the more I think about it, there is a lot of components going into the City squad. And people say, well, how is Nunez going to get on? How is Haaland going to get on? That is important. But Haaland has been one of the best young players for the last few years, like a generational talent to many people. He has had his injury issues, which are a concern for sure. But I don't think they're not like, I don't think it's going to stop him, right? Like ultimately, like, he might miss some games, but I don't think it's going to, if he's out for a long time, that'd be a shocker. If it happens, obviously that's, nobody wishes that upon any player, but that's just one of those twisted things that are part of the game. If you suffer an injury, you suffer an injury, and that's it. But he is a little injury prone, Erling Haaland. And at the same time, you got Cucurella coming in, who's, I think, a quality left back, playing in Brighton squad, who he's maybe just a little too good for. And then Calvin Phillips, who I'll be honest, I think Calvin Phillips is a solid midfielder. He is ultimately replacing Fernandinho, so it's not that big of a deal. For me, I'm just looking at it, and Liverpool, we have Calvin Ramsey, Fabio Carvalho, and Darwin Nunez to really integrate in the squad. They have, and admittedly, Calvin Ramsey and Fabio Carvalho are going to be rotational players at best. I don't see either of them starting in our strongest 11 come end of the season. If they do, credit to them, but I really doubt it. But when I look at City, they have to cope with the loss of Raheem Sterling. They have to kind of, I guess, catch Calvin Phillips up to speed on the Fernandinho role. They have to get Marc Cucurella playing as left back, to the quality level that they want. And trust me, I think that Cucurella and Haaland are quality signings. But you're losing Raheem Sterling, who I think was one of their best attackers. Yes, you still have Mahrez. Bernardo Silva's still there for now, maybe. Maybe he goes to Barca. But the more I think about it, the more I just get this feeling that Man City is in a spot where I think they're not going to really be fazed by the additions, but I do think there might be a few slip-ups. Calvin Phillips was fighting relegation last season, and I don't think that's indicative of how he'll play, but I don't know. I don't think Calvin Phillips is a game changer for them. Ultimately, he's a solid player, but will he be able to emulate the Swiss Army knife that was Fernandinho? I don't think so. I can't see him playing center back that well. So immediately you lose that cover from Fernandinho. He's a true DM or a center mid, an 8 or a 6 really, Calvin Phillips in my eyes. I think he'll be okay. I don't think he'll start week in, week out, but you got that issue to deal with. You got Marc Cucurella, who I think will probably be, if he gets signed by them, would be probably it'd be the easiest for him to just hit the ground running because he's going to play at left back. If he gets signed, I could imagine that they're going to play Cancelo at right back, and those two playing on the flanks together, I think could be really special. But Haaland's in an interesting spot. He in the Bundesliga, a lot of teams play with high lines, so that allows Haaland to make these darting runs and get in behind, just run to acres of free space. Whereas, so many teams in the Prem play a 3 or a 5 at the back, or even just a very defensive, low sitting block of a line. Again, even if they have a 4 at the back. There are a few teams that do that, and believe me, there are some teams that are going to be very, especially against City, and it's just the way it is. When you play for a big team like City, Liverpool, Chelsea, if you face a mid-table to lower mid-table team, usually they're willing to go all out. They aren't, if somebody gets sent off, they don't. It's not that they don't care, But it's like there's like this kind of almost motivation as a lower in the table team, I think, to want to really impress, so to speak. And sometimes emotions run high and somebody puts in a bad challenge and somebody gets hurt. I don't know why. I just could totally see Haaland getting a little too ahead of himself. I mean, City is a quality team, but City is a team who, as much as they have been dominant, there is this kind of chip on their shoulder, it feels like, where they have to prove, they feel like they have to prove a lot to everybody. You saw the unveilings of Haaland and Alvarez and some goalie, I forget who they signed, but that was very much like them trying to mimic the Galacticos and stuff. And while Haaland and Alvarez, in my eyes, are quality offensive signings, I think they'll be great at City. I do feel like there's a little bit of that edge has been lost to City. Like Sterling, I think will be able to handle the physicality of the Prem, the pace of it, the shoving, just everything that comes with being an attacker and having to think quick in the Prem. While I do think that City will generate a lot of chances, I feel like Haaland just at first is going to struggle a bit. And honestly, with his injury history, I could see him going out for a month or two. And if that happens outside of the World Cup window, that could be very detrimental to City. I mean, ultimately, we know that they could play without a false nine, or without a true nine, and play a false nine. But I do think at the same time there's something lacking there, and I just can't. I think it's the fact that these guys that they're bringing in City, they're quality players, but they're bringing in Haaland, who hasn't ever played a Premier League minute. They're bringing in Alvarez, who hasn't ever played a Premier League minute. Calvin Phillips, who was fighting a Premier League relegation last season, and Mark Cucurella, who was in the mid-table of the Prem last season. I think individually, they're all very quality players, but I do think as a whole, getting them to embrace, I guess, which is what they're going to have to do, because City's not going to go out and be like, okay, well, how do we play so we get the most out of Haaland? It's more like, how does Haaland play so that he gets the most while he's at City? Ultimately, I think there will be some kinks here and there that they'll iron out, but I do feel like the physicality could be a bit of a surprise to some people for Haaland, because I think he's going to have to deal with a lot more of, it's going to be a lot less of him just sprinting out into open space and a lot more of, okay, well, I got to get the ball and pass and try to run past somebody like, I don't know, Connor Cody or something, who's just keeping up with me because he's an experienced Premier League defender and he's going to be giving it his all to, get me from doing that. And, oh yeah, Wolves is playing a 5 at the back. I don't know. I just feel like ultimately City has a few too many moving parts this season that they're bringing in that are in some key areas where they're really going to have to adjust. Like the players, that is. They're going to have to adjust to play to the pace and to the intensity that is required to play with at Manchester City. I don't think they're going to be flops by any stretch of the imagination. I think by this time next year, they'll be great. But that first half of the season is just as important as the second half. I could see before the World Cup something just not clicking on all cylinders for City. Whereas with Liverpool, yes, Nunez is in. Is he a flop? I mean, you would think it after the miss against Manchester United, and then you would think he was the best signing after the 4 goals he scored, like the best signing of all time, really. That's kind of the two narratives I've been seeing, and quite frankly, I think Nunez, I've seen some Benfica fans say that Nunez is a very, very much a confidence player. When he's on form, when he's in confidence, he can just tear it up, and when he's not, he just doesn't. I don't know. I've only seen him play against us in the Champions League, and then I've seen him play a little bit for Uruguay. I think Nunez will be fine. I mean, he did have. Speaking of injury histories, let's keep it fair. I mean, he did have like a knee injury at Penarol or at, was it Almeida that he was at before? I forget where he sustained a knee injury, but ultimately, for me, Holland's coming into City to fill their star number 9 role, their star attacker. You could make an argument that so is Nunez. He's coming in Liverpool to fill in for the star attacker, right? But in many respects, Luis Diaz obviously came last season, and you could maybe say that in true, just like for talent, Luis Diaz is the true spiritual successor for Sadio Mane. He's the true replacement. I could take that, but let's just say in terms of Mane, right? We're losing Mane post AFCON this year, who's like a number 9 and just like doing a lot for us there. And I don't think we'll ever have a player who is, because Mane was on impeccable form coming out of AFCON, but Nunez is effectively replacing the Mane size hole in Liverpool's offense. Haaland is coming in to become the new number 9, which is, last season they played a false 9, right? So they didn't really have an out-and-out striker. Yeah, Gabi Jesus played sometimes, but sometimes he was on the right wing. It's weird. But, so you're for Haaland to come in and become City's next true number 9. He is effectively taking over the reins from their City's last true number 9, who in my eyes is, and I think everybody's eyes, is Sergio Aguero. Aguero obviously was, he wasn't the same player when he left City compared to, the first year they won the title, but Aguero was their talisman. So he's coming in to replace, realistically, that. But also you're losing Raheem Sterling and maybe Bernardo Silva, which if you lose Silva, I think this whole conversation is different. I think my maybe bodacious claims of Liverpool winning the league this upcoming season become a little more clear. Admittedly, we are just under 2 weeks away from the start of the season. Bernardo Silva could leave and they could replace him with another attacking mid who's just as exciting. Or Bernardo Silva could stay, or he could leave and they don't replace him. There's a lot of possibilities here. And while it is 2 weeks away from it, at the end of the day, is equally as difficult to predict now as it will be a day before, in my eyes, just because you never know with injuries and stuff. If I recorded this, say, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, however, maybe a couple weeks ago, I didn't know about the Aguerd injury. Nobody knew it. I mean, it just recently happened. It's a big one. So that could impact West Ham's performances. But I could sit here all day. I've been rambling for probably far too long now. But yeah, I'll just, I'll throw up something on the screen here that's effectively like the final predictions for the table, or maybe I'll just put in the description or something. I don't know. But yeah, I have predicted my Liverpool Reds to go on and win the title this upcoming season. I had City and Liverpool flip 2 weeks ago. Maybe it's just me being a bit more biased. Maybe it's seeing Darwin score 4 goals that got me excited. Maybe it's my thoughts on City kind of changing with the loss of Sterling, and also, I guess, just like them adding a lot of moving pieces to themselves, which isn't a bad thing. They could just hit the ground running and be fine. But that's how I have it for now. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, I love you. I love you. I truly do, because anybody that wants to sit there and listen to me ramble about sports and football for an hour, I don't, a couple things. I don't know what's wrong with you because I'm just a guy, but I do appreciate it. Like, we're best friends immediately. Much love. Gotta love it. But if you've made it to the end of the video, please, please, please tell me what you think of the predictions in the comment section down below. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Subscribe if you haven't. Turn on the notification bell. We're going to have a lot more videos coming out in the next couple days and weeks. And I'm going to continue putting out quality content for you guys, especially now with this wonderful, lovely little set behind me. So, it's been quite the ride, but thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm Sideline Sedo. Till next time, stay gold.